Good evening. It being just a bit after 7 o'clock, we'll call this edition of Kenmore Planning Commission meeting for July 18th in session. First, we have on our agenda be reading or approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Do we have any comments, suggestions, or changes to those? Hearing none. Consider those to be approved. Public comment. Do we have anybody? I don't see anyone in-house. Do we have anybody online?
We do not have anyone online.
All right, then we've satisfied that portion of our agenda. We will move on to our other agenda items. Invite Debbie and our newest member to the front table.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce our new Principal Planner, Todd Hall. Todd recently came from the North Shore School District. He was in the capital project side as a director there, but he has a wealth of experience in other planning jurisdictions. So I'll let Todd introduce himself and say a few words.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Debbie. Yeah, my name is Todd Hall. I'm in my third week here of the city. So yes, I know everything there is. No, I'm just kidding. I was introduced last night at the city council meeting. So you guys are the second group to meet tonight. And I met Commissioner Ben Natsky. Can you pronounce that?
Yeah, it's really, I know it looks hard, but it's easy. It's Bana Shinsky. Yeah, Bana Shinsky.
I will remember that.
I'm happy to help anytime.
Yeah. So we met last night in the hall, but it's a pleasure to be here. As Debbie said, I most recently came from the North Shore School District where I was a director of capital, but my heart and actually my degree is in urban planning. And so I've done that most of my career over the last 20 plus years. And so Kenmore is one of the many jurisdictions that I've served over the course of my career. I worked at Mercer Island, Kirkland, Duval, Arlington, and then my last jurisdiction I worked at was the city of Linwood for 7 years. And then I did a couple of short stints with consulting work, environmental consultant and planning consulting. So I'm really pleased to be here and help the city, Kenmore, and you all with moving the city forward. A fun fact, I actually lived in the city of Kenmore 23 years ago, which is now called Trail Walk condos, but back then they were Trail Walk apartments. And my back window faced the new park there that was there. It was woods, but now that's a beautiful, and actually enjoyed it this evening. So I got to check it out, but it was really nice. But yeah, I actually lived there with an old college buddy of mine, and now here I am working for the city. So anyway, yeah, it's just great to be here tonight.
Well, welcome, Todd. Certainly going to appreciate your being here, I'm sure. Life does seem to be a circle. Welcome back. Our agenda today, we have two components, elements of the comprehensive plan to consider, hopefully finalized by the end of the day. Our goal is to hopefully be able to move these forward to a public meeting in the near future. The first, a public service element. We actually gave a preliminary approval of this in an earlier meeting, as I understand it. This is already proceeding through the Commerce 60-day notice clock, and the SEPA review has been completed. We did ask a few questions, which have been responded to in the materials sent out to folks. If there aren't any additional information, I'd like to suggest that we move ahead and move this to a public hearing.
If it's okay with staff, I just noticed a few things for consistency that I would love to help by pointing out. They're not substantial changes.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So I noticed when I was looking at the map on page, it's map figure PS1. Yeah, that one. Kenmore, it's still Kenmore Junior High. It should be Kenmore Middle School. It's referred to as Kenmore Middle School throughout the text, but on the map it still says Kenmore Junior High. And then also my favorite new park, Twin Springs Park, does not appear on this map. Twin Springs Park is about at 80th and 192nd. Yes, I'm sure the Beavers are working on it, Derek. Okay, and then in the school, the North Shore School District section, thank you so much for reaching out to Innovation Lab High School and the North Shore Family Partnership and North Shore Networks. So they appear in the text on page 918. But then they aren't in the table PSC. And I'm wondering if they provided any statistics for any of those programs. Again, Innovation Lab High School, North Shore Networks, and North Shore Family Partnership.
Yeah, I'll have to reach out to somebody new. Another fun fact, the individual that the previous planner reached out to was my former boss at North Shore School District, and she's been moved to teach at North Creek High School now. So she's no longer in the division that her and I worked together. We both had offices right next to each other. So I'll see if I can get a hold of somebody to get additional details with that.
Yeah, it's good to have those connections.
Yeah.
And then I think that's it for consistency. And then I just have to say, because it happened to me every time I read it, but in the very beginning, it says that Kenmore is served by 2 school districts and services are provided by 2 school districts. And I understand that part of St. Edward State Park actually is in the Lake Washington School District, but they're not providing any services for it. So I stumble over that wording every time. And I know that it's fleshed out later in the section, but because it happened to me so many times and I haven't said anything, I just wanted to say it out loud. And now I feel satisfied.
Yeah, and I didn't quite, I saw that when I was reviewing it today, and I had the same question because I was confused why there was a map in there, and then I found the part that said it's the boundary bisects the state park, but there's no students. So
yeah, and
it's only really North Shore is the only serving school district.
Providing services.
Providing
Did you notice that on the map, Kenmore is not even on Lake Washington School District's map?
Yeah.
They just cut it off right at the boundary of the park. Yeah.
So I guess that begs the question. I know it technically goes through the jurisdiction, but we don't serve any. I mean, is it the practice that we've included that for many years? I guess we could keep it that way.
I think in the past, before it was the lodge, when the state parks owned it, I think the what's the person who takes care of the park? The ranger, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
The ranger lived in that building, and I think his children
There you go.
went to the Lake
Historical
Washington
fact.
School District. So that's a historical fact.
That actually is correct. I knew that family and the kids went to Lake Washington.
So we could change that to something else, and maybe not the word serving is the right verb, but something else. We'll come up with a different one.
more, Tracy? No. Other commissioners, do you have additional comments or questions before we move on?
So could I, this is Commissioner Kadri, could I make a comment about Chief Moen's, I was reading the memorandum that the city manager had sent, and I had asked previously to differentiate between felonies and misdemeanor offenses in the city of Kenmore. And his response was, so many crimes are felonies under state law, but do not meet the King County Prosecutor's Office filing standards, so they're filed as misdemeanors. Well, the way the law is structured, if the prosecutor's office doesn't file a felony, that means it's not a felony, it's a misdemeanor offense. And so I do think that it's important for us to include at least, or have some kind of record of what's a felony and what's a misdemeanor. There's a burglary versus a robbery. Those are two different crimes. They're both felonies, but it's important for the residents and the citizens of Kenmore to know, because that comes to the safety of the citizens in Kenmore. So I do think that if we can at least have some sort of record between, felony cases that actually have been filed by the prosecutor's office and misdemeanor offenses that have been filed by the prosecutor's office. I mean, police officers can arrest anyone they want, but is it actually a crime? So I struggle with the statement that Chief Moen made, and that was quoted in the agenda. And so I just wanted to make a comment about that. And I'm not sure what the solution is. I'm not sure. I know there's a staff shortage as far as record keeping, but I do think that's important for at least, for us to know what kind of crimes are being committed in our city. That's not a question. I guess it's a comment, or I suppose a question of whether or not it is possible for us to at least keep records of what cases are actually being filed by people that commit crimes in our area.
If I can respond to that, I mean, we can certainly ask the question again. This was asking the chief directly. This was his response, and I don't know where. I don't think we have too much in there about crime data. So it wouldn't, even if we got that information, it wouldn't really be providing anything useful that would need to be included in the comp plan element.
Yeah, I mean, typically, public services element doesn't provide that, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't generalize something. So we could approach the chief again and see if there's.
And I appreciate that.
Data that we can include.
My apologies for getting a little passionate about that, but it's something that is kind of is a quote in the agendas. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Passion's a good thing. Question. What's the correct database of record? Are we asking the right person for this information? Is this information that would be captured here in Kenmore, or is it King County that we should be asking the question to?
Well, the chief is actually a King County employee.
Oh, that's right.
So I think we're asking the right person. I don't know what kind of data or tracking is available in terms of King County in general or Kenmore specifically. Again, this would be more sort of as information to you, but it wouldn't necessarily be something we would be amending the comp plan to include that data.
And just for clarification, is he a King County employee or is he a city of Kenmore employee? Because I thought I read that the chief is actually a city employee and we contract with the King County Sheriff's Office for police service.
We do contract. He gets paid by King County.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
White, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I agree with all the comments of the prior commissioners that have raised some points with regard to some word changes that need to be done. Also, I believe Commissioner Condrey would agree with me that the other place where data is in the state data source with regard to what are the filings, because they have, once they put the filing in, whatever it may be, it has to go into the big database in the sky, which includes the Washington State crime database. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, you're correct about that. Absolutely, yeah. From my understanding, yeah.
So there is another place to look, possibly, and we have the ability to reach and do that if we had to, but I would hope that our chief understands our concerns and can figure out something that will work for him and for us.
And again, this is Commissioner Cottery again. And Seattle has a problem with car thefts. They have a problem with armed robberies and burglaries in homes. Those are things that are important for us too. We're very close to Seattle, what, 10 minutes away from the city of Seattle. It's important for us to know. I know there's a chart later on in the comprehensive plan about property crimes, crimes against people. I think it's important for us to actually know what kind of crimes are being committed, and that's why I know I'm a little frustrated about like his comment, and I know it's not his fault. I know we don't have the resources to be able to keep records of that, but as far as our job, it's to protect and to have people realize, understand what's happening in our community, and so I think having a safe community is very important, and how we know that is by knowing what kind of crimes are being committed in this community. So that's what I'm trying to say here, and hopefully Chief Mullen could maybe we can have him in one of our meetings so we can ask him these questions, and maybe we can come up with some cohesive plan to get these records out there for everyone to know about. So, but thank you for my.
Commissioner Thompson again. And I think this is a valid point from the public's information and how the city is responding, because those of us who watch some of the blogs, Kenmore Neighbors and other types of blogs, we see a lot of items come up that leave a lot open to what really happened, and was it a crime or was it not? And if we have better data that we can share with the public, that might calm down some of the hyperbola that may show up in some of these blogs.
Again, to respond to that, I know the police chief does give a report to council. So again, you have to kind of think about the venue that you're providing the data and the purpose of the data. So what is provided in here is kind of the level of what is typical for providing in a public service element for a comprehensive plan. Not to say that there isn't any more data available. It's just kind of figuring out, is this the right format? Is this the right level of data? Again, I'd have to do some checking, but I know the police chief does give reports to the council on in terms of services and crimes and things like that. So if that's something of interest, we can probably provide a link to that for the Planning Commission as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other concerns or comments before we move on? Not, could we have a motion then to move public services element to a public hearing? I think we have a tentative date of 8:15. Is that true?
That's correct.
Do we have a motion? Moved, seconded?
Seconded.
Jenny, should we do the roll?
Can I just verify, Commissioner Wyckoff, was that you that made the motion? Okay. And seconded was made by?
Commissioner Cottery.
All right. Commissioner Lutzis, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Commissioner Badziski?
Yes.
All right. Vice Chair Vanderlyn
Aye.
and Chair Thompson?
Aye.
All right. All in favor?
Thank you. Let's move on to the utilities element.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
may I, if it's okay with the commission, I personally would like to have the commission have an advanced copy of what, I know there's going to be a few little changes. But what, this is going to be fixed, and if we could have at least an advance copy to see any of the issues that were changed based on our comments tonight.
Seems reasonable. Debbie, can we have that before the public hearing?
You mean, usually we send out the draft a week in advance of the meeting. Are you asking for additional time? You don't
Yes.
have,
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily want, I think some of us have, would you just give us like like before the weekend or something like that? Because I think you have to post it on a Monday, right? Or I know hearing has different rules, so.
I believe the
me out.
hearing is 10 days in advance. So we have to publish the public hearing notice 10 days in advance.
Okay, so we don't have much time, so just, I withdraw my request.
Thank you, Dwight. All right, then moving on our agenda, utilities element. We actually took this up at an earlier meeting. We asked staff to respond to 2 questions, which they have in the materials provided. We also made very extensive edits and changes, particularly to section 3. The first 2 sections are introduction and existing conditions. Both of these, I point out, tend to be either very factually oriented, which we had few comments on, or the introduction itself is really a recapitulation, a summary of the meat of it, which is in the 3rd section. So if it's the sense of the commission, I'd suggest that we move to the 3rd section, spend our time there and go through carefully what the responses were in that section. Is that acceptable to folks? Or do you want to go through the introduction and the existing condition section?
That's fine.
It's Commissioner Carter. That's fine with me. I just have a comment about another response from the memo that we received regarding recycling. And I think it was Commissioner Wyckoff that had asked a question as to why we can't have recycling every week. And I think Jennifer Gordon's response from the Public Works Operations Director, even if we decide to do this, there's a 10-year period before it would go into effect. And I guess my question would be, is this a contract that the city of Kenmore has gotten into? I do think that recycling is very important. I think Commissioner Wyckoff's concern was very important as to why recycling happens every other week as opposed to every week. And so I guess that was my only question that I have in regards to the responses to our questions previously. So is this a contract the city of Kenmore has gotten into? And why is it that we can't do recycling once a week? Why do we have to wait 10 years for that? That's a very long time for us to worry about recycling on a weekly basis as opposed to a bi-weekly basis.
Commissioners, I would kind of point you to the response from Jennifer Gordon. She notes that we have Republic Services and they are regulated by the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. The city does not have a direct contract. So I guess it's in terms of the regulations with the UTC that dictate the timeline.
And can that be changed? Can that be amended? Can that be, is it possible for Kenmore to be able to do it on a weekly basis? And again, these are just questions that came to mind.
I would just, this was the response we got from Jennifer, that, you know, if we wanted to make that change, then it's working with the UTC, and it looks like there is a 10-year period to do that. I think what you're asking is, could we do it any quicker? From her previous response, it would be no. We can double check and clarify that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So I sat in on the study session last night at the city council meeting with Republic Services. And my understanding is that what takes 10 years is if Kenmore wanted to switch from being a UTC city, a Utilities and Transportation Committee city, to being a regulator city, that's what takes 10 years. My impression from being in the study session last night, however, was that Kenmore can have more say in the level of service through ordinance. And it does not take 10 years to pass an ordinance. I'm not exactly sure what kinds of services can change through ordinance, so that would be something we'd have to double check with city council, or probably not the city council, some staff, maybe Jennifer and Republic Services. But I don't think that we are locked into recycling biweekly unless we become a regulator city. I would be very surprised if that were the case.
We have some fact finding.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to do some fact checking and see. And then the question is, if that is possible by process, then the question then is that something that the city should initiate? It's two different questions.
Well, I guess the follow-up question to this is, how does this impact our current draft of the element? Is there something we need to add in here? Do we need to wait until we get an answer to these questions, or can we ask these questions and then move forward with the element?
I think we can ask these questions and move forward because these are more fact-based things rather than policy level.
Yeah, we have a section on here about recycling, you know, for commercial recycling. And I think there's another comment about residential. So these are existing conditions now. What we're going to be fact finding about is things that we could possibly change for future services. So there's really nothing substantive in the comp plan that we would change now.
So our current policy, would it allow or suggest that we are, one of our objectives, maybe we can get this into the next section, would be to have as frequent, well-supported recycle as possible within the regulatory structure that we live in.
If that is not adequately addressed, then that would be a change you could suggest. Absolutely.
That's what I suggest. Let's take a look at this again when we get into the objective session, and maybe that's, if you want to say something more there, that's where we should do it. Any other comments or follow-up on the responses to the questions or to the factual presentations in the existing conditions section?
I have just two things in the first section before we get to policies and objectives. On page 10.2, line 23. I'm kind of waiting for the screen to catch up, but do I not need to do that?
Nope, that's fine.
Okay. It's talking about the how PSC is generating its electricity. It calls out hydro, thermal, solar, and wind. I would prefer, if this is what it means, that thermal were replaced by gas and coal. Every time I've read this section, I feel like the fact that PSC is still largely a gas and coal fueled utility is obscured. And I think, given that we're in the middle of a climate crisis, I just like to be real clear-eyed that they are still using gas and coal. So I would prefer it to say, if that's true, hydro, gas, coal, solar, and wind.
I'll second that.
I'll third it.
All four.
All fourth, I find the terminology of thermal energy as some magic hole in the ground that steam comes out of that turns some turbine.
Okay, so are we making a motion about this?
I didn't hear a motion. though.
Yes, I think what we,
Can you reiterate what the verbiage would say for
I
a
make
motion?
a motion to change line 23 on page 10.2 to read plants dash hydro, gas, coal, solar, and wind. And then the rest remains as is.
does this terminology repeat any elsewhere in the document?
I think there may have been one other place where I saw thermal, maybe.
We want to make a change everywhere.
There it is. 1023.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Tracy. This has been one of my concerns with this. It seems to be we use terms like, say, electric. Well, no, it's not electric. It's there are fuel sources behind it. Electricity is not a fuel source. It's a product of a fuel source. And I think with the thermal, and it's absolutely wrong, I think, terminology. It's good to get down and have the actual facts in here. Thank you for that. Anything else on the intro or existing conditions section?
Before we move on, I just want to clarify.
Oh, we need a motion?
I need the motion made and then seconded and then a vote, please.
I think you made a motion.
Yep.
We have a second?
Was it seconded?
I
Thank you.
seconded. Commissioner Qadri. Seconded.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you.
So the second thing, the last thing is on 10.9. There's a section called Energy Conservation Program, and I need to be checked on this, but I think it's appearing twice. The first time, I think it was on 10.5. I looked at it 3 times at home just to double check, but I want to be double checked by you all here.
Looks like it's.
Yeah, and I think it's all, I think the text is exactly the same.
Huh,
I
okay.
think.
Good catch.
Okay, so I don't know where it fits better, first or second appearance, but I just wanted to point
Take a
that out.
look.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Tracy? Any of the other commissioners have further comments or concerns about the intro or the existing conditions section? Hearing none, let's move on. We're now looking at the goals, objectives, and policy section, which, as I recall, starts on page 60 and goes through page 66. We have a lot in here. Would folks like to go through this section by section? Why don't we do that then? Take us to the top of that first section. That's on page 60. Okay, there we go. Whoop.
So, right, do you want me to go through line by line?
What were you gonna say? I think section by section, not necessarily line by line.
Oh, okay.
So you've got goal U1. Roll through these. For goal U1, any concerns, questions? Okay, we move on to the next one, please. Goal U2. Questions, concerns? Edits here acceptable to commissioners.
Mike, can I just confirm that does policy U 2.1.5 regarding recycling address your previous comments?
Thank you.
Debbie, would that policy allow for moving from biweekly to weekly recycling if the city wanted to go that way? I don't necessarily read it that way. It seems more about education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's either adding a new policy or something about increasing opportunities for recycling and
And we add something maybe
composting
to
and
U,
sustainable consumption.
policy U 2.1.3 seems to head in that direction. Can we add some language there? Coordinate current service providers to ensure that waste pickup and waste services are available.
Good point.
Nathan has his hand up.
No, it's just reliable. Nathan,
Yeah, quick question. I see two U 2.1.5s. Should the last one be 0.6?
Oh, yeah,
or
you're right. Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
So do we have some preferred language for 2.1.3? How would we change that? It says cycling surfaces are reliable. Do we want to say? What do we want to say there?
This is Commissioner Cottery, maybe on a more regular basis, i.e. once a week.
Or
Or-
frequent, maybe frequent, i.e. on a more regular basis.
That, yeah, it's something like, I can't think of the exact words right now, but when I do, I will certainly speak up here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the verbiage to show that the goal is for it to match the waste pickup. So the frequency would follow that of waste pickup, whatever that is. My wordsmithing part of my brain's not working today.
Yeah.
Reliable, consistent.
Yeah,
Consistent with Kenmore citizens' expectations and needs.
I think that's a little too muddy. Because,
Fair enough.
but we're getting there though.
I think if we put on a more consistent basis, that covers, I think that's broad enough for us to be able to cover all sides of people's opinions on recycling.
Other folks happy with that? Debbie, do you have enough information to do?
Yeah.
Make that change. Okay, great. Let's move on. U3. Questions, comments, concerns? Tracy.
I have a question about policy U 3.1.6. Support the availability and efficient use of natural gas. Yeah, why, can somebody give me a history of why this policy has appeared in our comprehensive plan? Why it sits here now?
I think this has been here for a while,
Wow.
so I think the question then is whether we should amend it based on direction to get away from natural gas. Is that, am I reading your mind there or not?
You are reading my mind. I didn't know which to start with first. I thought I'd do a little bit of information seeking, but I personally don't think that this should be a policy objective in Kenmore. I think we should support the move away from natural gas whenever possible,
Okay.
instead of supporting its continued existence.
Other comments? Nathan.
So just going off of Tracy, could we just strike that policy then and move everything up one? I mean, I know we talk elsewhere about efficient and environmentally conscious energy usage, and I think just striking that would revert back to what we've said elsewhere in the piece.
What?
Well, I generally agree with that. However, I think a little bit of reality, maybe something like, just to start, not to say this is exactly right, but support the availability and efficient use of natural gas in accordance with the climate action plan of the city, or something like that. I don't know if support is the right word, but we could put it into the reference the climate action plan. And I think that might be a reasonable way to get started on this topic.
Could you say something like support the transition to sustainable energy sources as noted in the climate action plan?
I'm good with that. I don't know what Commissioner Benezinski thinks, but that's, I think, a good way to go.
I personally like something that does call out moving away from natural gas because I feel like that's one of the projects of our time right now. And I think it does acknowledge that there is natural gas use in our community right now. Moving away from it, it kind of acknowledges to an extent that there may be some places where it's harder than others. We might get further in some areas than others, but I think calling out that we have a policy to move away from it rather than just calling out using other sources of energy, feels better to me.
Oh, so how about support the transition from use of natural gas to sustainable energy sources? I'm trying to I'm doing
Yeah.
my best to capture.
You're doing well, Debbie.
I would support that. I think this is a legacy
Yeah.
section
Yeah,
right
I
here.
agree.
From back when cities were eager to get natural gas lines installed and they weren't universal. So I think rather than striking it, I like the idea of making a comment here that we want this to be consistent with our the rest of our planning. What do you want to say?
I concur.
Debbie, do you have language?
Yeah, I think you
Yep.
Want to repeat
So
it just so we
wanna make a
let me-
motion.
Do you want me to make, I can say it
Yeah.
one more time. So support the transition from use of natural gas to use of renewable energy sources.
How would the commission feel about green renewable energy sources?
Oh, yeah.
I second that. I like that.
Okay. Support transition from use of natural gas to use of green renewable energy sources. I'm seeing 4 heads nodding, so that's enough for me.
I second that.
All right, we ready to move on to U4?
I have actually want something on policy U 3.3.1. Oh, Nathan's raised his hand. Nathan, do you want to go first? I've
You
had
can
this
go
one for a
first.
while.
You can finish up if you want.
Okay,
That's fine with
I'll
me.
finish this one and I'll cede the floor to you. So I noticed that a section earlier on EMFs was completely taken out of the document. And then when I read it in the policy section, it made my mind kind of catch on it. I don't know much about EMFs. I'm guessing at one point it was contentious in our community, and that's why it appeared both in the narrative and down here. I'm wondering why we took it out of the narrative and whether or not that means we should take it out here, or if there should be discussion about it. I'm open.
Which section are you on again, Tracy?
I'm on 1020, policy U 3.3.1. It says review periodically the state of scientific research on electromagnetic fields, EMF, and make changes to policies if the situation warrants. Debbie, had you been involved in taking it out of the narrative?
I'm just
It's like the whole thing is deleted.
rolling up to that.
Oh, here. So 10-5. This may my guess, I don't know, maybe it was when PSC
Yeah, I think
representative came and said that this isn't really applicable. And
that's kind of jogging my memory. I think this was
Uh-huh.
kind of from review from PSE. So I think we
Uh-huh.
can either take it out, if we want to be consistent, we would take it out of
got
the
this last
last
policy.
policy for consistency
Right here.
purposes.
Well, I guess I would ask too is, well, objective 3.3. That one could be okay. It's just that 3-point policy U 3.3.1 would be removed.
What do people sense on that? Sound good? Not hearing
Yeah.
any objection.
Yeah,
Let's remove it.
I'm okay with that.
Anything else on U3?
Yes, I have a couple of things.
Go ahead.
Am I free to speak?
Yes,
Sorry.
please.
Okay, all right. 3.4, objective 3.4. I noticed this was a little messy. There were some notes there. First of all, I'm just to get the simple stuff out of the way, looking at 3.4.3, it looks like in red, there's a note there that says wherever practical and feasible, consider undergrounding of existing overhead facilities. To me, it makes more sense just to say wherever practical and feasible underground existing overhead facilities. Just because we already addressed when it's not feasible above that, but also based on the notes down below 3.4.7. Let's see where it says utility placements must take into account aesthetics and views, and undergrounding is required unless unfeasible or unreasonably costly. So can we just, rather than say consider undergrounding, we just say underground them, since it sounds like they have to anyways?
I agree with that comment.
Makes sense.
I think we have consensus on that.
And then I'm just trying to sort of comprehend some of the other stuff. So 3.4.2, so we should probably take action to clarify based on some of these notes, I assume. 3.4.2 gives the recommendation for developers to install a vault at the development boundary, which isn't exactly clarified in the policy itself. So is that something that you're suggesting that we insert there, is maybe just say require developers to install an empty conduit at, let's see, conduit or vaults at the development boundary, or take other measures to facilitate future undergrounding of aerial utilities, or sort of what was kind of sought with that note there?
That note was kind of my notes to sort of figure out that there was an issue here. So I spoke with the city engineer and asked him to review this section particularly to see that what was in there as a policy was actually practical and feasible. And so the notes in red were his response that, you know, you can have this policy in there, but it's not really feasible for these specific reasons. So I think we either would have to amend that policy to sort of be, say what, I think we just have to kind of, yeah, and I'm looking at this now, my mouse and brain aren't connecting very well at this minute. I think these notes were basically from the engineer saying, you have these in here, but it's really from a practical point, not easy to do. So I think we'd either have to add language in there to talk about if practical, or when practical, or if feasible, and then note that it might be limited, or we take it out, or we make it.
I'll jump in here and then ask other people to comment. I think we need to have a statement in here, but I think trying to be overly specific here and anticipate future conditions just isn't working.
Mhm.
How about if we have more simple language, something along the lines of starting at the beginning, where undergrounding is not presently feasible, we require that the developer take other measures to facilitate future undergrounding of aerial utilities.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I see shaking heads all the way around. Great. Nathan, anything else? Or what else?
I don't see, looking through the red notes, I don't see any major contradictions between or contest between the notes and what we have there. It looks like just a couple that say this is just required elsewhere, or something like that, which as long as it's in line, I don't have an issue with. So I think those were my two big concerns.
Great, thank you very much. Other commissioners, are we ready to move on to U4? Like we are. Questions, comments, concerns? U4.
This is Commissioner Cadre here. In policy U-4.1.2, I make a motion to say consider and implement water conservation principles. Let's be forward thinking. Let's be aggressive here. I would like to say consider and implement water conservation principles. Just I guess semantics. I'd like to include that just so we can be a little more aggressive with this.
Other
So
folks, comments?
this is Commissioner Thompson. So what you're asking is in striking the word consider and
I would say consider and implement water conservation principles. We can really consider it, but once we consider it, I think it's a good way to good thing to implement as well.
How about if we just strike consider and say implement water conservation principles?
Please, I move to do. My motion is to say implement water conservation principles.
I'm good with that.
Being nods all around.
Is there a second?
Is that an official motion or is that just
I
kind
don't
of
think
a
we-
suggestion?
That's an official motion by Commissioner Cadre to strike consider and replace that with
Commissioner
implement.
Cadre is saying it's an official motion, so.
Second,
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
I,
I,
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion passed. Other comments, questions, concerns about 4? Tracy?
I am wondering why policy U4.1.4 was struck. I'm guessing, did somebody check in with Brightwater and it's not feasible?
Yeah, I think this was kind of a carryover.
Uh-huh, okay. Have we talked about gray water use as a commission? I'm wondering if we can build in a policy to promote gray water use. I think that that's what this policy was getting at, but maybe the specificity of using gray water from Brightwater in particular was limiting.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
probably it. So we could craft something to say, support the use of, I don't know what the specific term, if it's reclaimed water or grey water. I don't know if there's a,
I've heard both, yeah.
okay. So we could just say, support the use of grey water for irrigation. We could leave it like that and take out the reference to the utility district and Brightwater.
as long as we make it clear that it's reclaimed water. I had a wonderful experience running through sprinklers down in Florida once that I didn't find out until afterwards was not fresh water.
Oh.
Do we have any perhaps city regulation on this? Because I know, for instance, in golf courses and other places, they have to make a point of making notice what is potable water and what is not potable water.
Well, this is Commissioner Thompson. One of the codes in a lot of counties in California required new developments or new tracts to have both a clean water and a gray water system. And then they have requirements for residents to use gray water on their shrubs and other vegetation. Just a comment. So I think looking to the future, we could maybe catch up over a period of years, maybe decades.
Yeah, it seems like we don't have the infrastructure in place right now to really be promoting the use of gray water. So it seems like we need to be right now promoting practices that will put those structures in place.
Okay, so suggested support the use of reclaimed water for irrigation, which sort of is broad. And so, Commission, do you want to add anything in terms of practices or anything else into that policy? Or
I think we're looking for something here that would be along the lines of where available infrastructure is appropriate for public safety. But my follow-up to that is, do we want to have either in this policy or another, a policy that says we want to work toward the ability to be using reclaimed water, develop the infrastructure appropriate to do it in public safety?
Okay. So support the use of necessary, support the provision of necessary infrastructure for
Safe use
For-
of reclaimed water.
for use of reclaimed water for irrigation.
Are folks good with that?
I think that encourages or opens the door at least for those investigations, initiatives, whatnot. Yeah, I mean, it shows we're supporting that.
I'm okay with that. It's Commissioner Cottery.
Okay, so that's 4 of you, so we'll make that change.
Anything more on U4? Seeing any, we move on to U5. Nathan.
Just a quick little spelling thing. Renewable in goal U5. I think it's missing an E.
It is.
And that goes for anything else. If there's other spelling mistakes or something you catch along the way, please feel free to do that. I do have another comment really quick, if that's okay with everyone. And that's on policy 5.2.4. It's actually towards the end there. Now, in reading this, it says promote small to large scale renewable energy production facilities within the city. This may include solar energy, wind turbines, or hydroelectric. And my question here is, when it says large scale renewable energy production facilities, I don't know that Kenmore has the physical land capacity needed for a wind farm or for a solar farm. And I don't know how feasible it is to dam up the Sammamish River, or that we'd ever want to. So I mean, maybe we can discuss this a little bit more, but maybe in my eyes, just simplifying that to promote renewable energy production within the city, and then take out everything else, calling out those specific means, but also maybe taking out the production facility portion, just because I don't know with those examples listed that we have the capacity, the physical capacity to truly do that within the city. So maybe just simplifying it to promoting renewable energy production within the city.
I agree with that.
This is Commissioner Thompson. I am sure that Commissioner Banazinski is just relieved that you don't want to dam up the Sammamish River.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all.
Just imagine what it would do to all of those homes and clubs and parks. I mean, and we'd probably get one piece, one little bit of power out of that. That's pretty good. Anyway, yeah, I agree with that perspective.
I just interjected, once again, I think being overly specific here could be a long-term problem for us. So I think
Just leave it at promote renewable energy production facilities.
Or maybe
Eliminate
even
it
just,
altogether.
no, or even just remove the facilities and just say promote renewable energy production within the city.
Within the city, yeah.
And I think that's a good catch-all, and we're not kind of putting ourselves in a corner there or writing checks we can't really cash just because we don't have the land capacity in the city of Kenmore to do some of those other things.
any other comments on that? Seems like we got consent. Tracy?
Yes, I just really do hope that writing it broadly does not mean we're going to get people wanting to install hydroelectric in our watershed, because that would be a very bad idea.
Well,
No, I completely agree, and
Yeah,
that's kind
I
of
know
why I
you do,
want to
Nathan. Yeah.
take that out.
I appreciated that you raised that. Thank you.
I understand your concern, Tracy, and this is a crazy world. Crazy ideas get floated, but I think we know how to deal with those, would deal with those. I'm just going to take the vice chair privilege here as a temporary chair to bring up an issue that I think probably is related to this section. And probably people have seen in news lately, some of the concern related to the large battery installments that are necessary in order to support the transition to particularly solar and wind energy. I'm sure that Kenmore does not at this point have regulation concerning the use of those, siting of those, what sort of barrier or setbacks there have to be for that. I think that's something we need to consider. I don't think we have this. At least I didn't notice this being mentioned anywhere in our policy, but it seems like that would be something we want to add. Debbie, did I miss something?
No, and I'm just kind of trying to figure out where would be the appropriate place to put something like that.
Well, I was thinking it might go, it may not be a great fit, but I think it would be appropriate under 5.2, because anything of that likely size or whatnot is going to have to be part of a regional project. Be building transmission lines to that, from that. So having something in here that, and the policy, I think we would say something, we would support the study, development of regulations to manage, what do we call them? That they're called batteries, but like.
Yeah, one of the things I've seen other cities do when I've read up on this particular subject is working with their local fire department to make sure that they're not getting ahead of the fire department's capacity to respond to situations. Similarly to not allowing 150-foot buildings when you only have a 100-foot ladder.
But Mike, where you were going was toward the work that we need to do to develop policies around large storage batteries. Is that what you were looking for? Is that where you're
Yes,
going?
I mean, I think
Large.
we need to
Yeah.
accept the fact that that's something that's likely to be posed. And so we don't have, as a city, we don't at this point have the regulatory control for that, because it would be part of a regional effort. I think this is the section to have it in. In terms of the language, I think we would create a priority that says that we would develop the necessary regulatory structure to allow the potential development of storage batteries within Kenmore, within taking into account public safety issues. We have consensus on that. Don't see anybody shaking their heads the other way, so I'm going to assume so. Anything else on U5?
And this is Commissioner Cadre. I'm looking at policy U5.2.3. I know when we were discussing the climate action plan, we had agreed to remove specificity with Puget Sound Energy, and we've included Puget Sound Energy in this section. So I guess my motion would be to remove the actual name Puget Sound Energy and maybe put and encourage the contracted energy company to provide clean and renewable energy. I believe we have Kenmore has a contract with PSE for a few years or whatnot. So I would move to remove the actual specific company because that may change in the future. Who knows? But that's my motion at this point, is to replace the actual name Puget Sound Energy to the contracted energy company at the time.
Other commissioners have any concerns with that, supporting that? Shake your heads, give me a thumbs up.
If Commissioner Quadri has made a motion, I need a second, please.
Second.
I will second.
And a vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Could the
Unanimous.
could the clerk read the text now as you understand it to read with the passage of the amendment?
I think Debbie has that.
So it would be to delete Puget Sound Energy from policy U52.3 and replace that with collaborate with and encourage the contracted energy provider.
That's correct.
Blake, did you have any follow-up on that?
Nope, I just wanted to make sure what it was going to look exactly like. Thank you very much.
Other issues with U5? Hearing none, move on to U6. Oh, we're at the end. References. Anybody want to nitpick the?
When implementation strategies.
strategies.
Oh, I was hoping we'd avoid that. Tracy, you had a comment?
Yeah, so I think this, Todd, is this where you caught the second instance of thermal? Was that where it came up in your search? Yeah, I wondered actually why it should be there at all. I would favor just such as solar and wind,
Yeah.
such as wind and solar. Just take thermal out of there.
Yeah, I put that as a note to remove.
Okay.
thermal.
Great, thank you.
Or would it be possible to just stop at energy sources? Renewable energy sources,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
fine,
Let's
too,
do that.
yeah.
I don't want to step on Tracy's toes here, please, by all means, if I just don't know if calling out
Tracy, are you
only.
okay with that?
Yeah, I think sometimes I do get a little nervous when we leave things open that it could come back and somebody could interpret it in a way that we don't intend. But in this case, I think it's probably okay. My only hesitation is that I know that a lot of gas companies are trying to push like liquid natural gas as a clean energy source and things like that. But yeah, that's a kind of an unformed thought of mine. If no other commissioners share that concern, then I'm willing to let it go.
Dwight has his hand raised. Let's see what he has to say.
Well, I'm going to wait until that issue is resolved, and then I would like the floor after that.
Well, then I will follow up on Tracy's comment. I think consistent with what we've done elsewhere, leaving this open to energy sources and trusting that wise people in the future will make good decisions. I'm a lot older than you are, so I could say that. The future looks a lot. Do we have? Oh, you're right. Oh, God, that changed my mind. Do we have consensus on that? Which would be, we end this after energy sources and renewable energy sources, striking everything after energy sources. Looks like we do. Thank you. White, you had the floor.
If at the commission's desire, I recommend that these two documents that we have worked on tonight, that we ask the staff to remove all the coloring and make the changes like the strike throughs and get rid of that, and then have only a blue highlight of things that were changed tonight, so that we clearly do not review or need to review things that we've already looked at.
That seems prudent, and I see broad agreement.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dwight. Any other questions, comments, concerns about implementation strategies? Not seeing any. Tracy?
I just have a dream that I will share with you all as a way to implement some of these things. I would really love if we had a public utility district instead of worked with PSE. I don't know that we'd need to codify that in our implementation section, but I'm just sharing that as an aspiration.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other questions, concerns, comments on the implementation section? Hands or questions raised? Shall we move? I think we've gone through. Whoop.
That is the end.
But we have some
Yes.
additional changes from what we have here. So I don't know, what's the sense of the commission? Do we feel like we want to take one more look at this at another meeting? Can we ask for a clean version, just as Dwight has asked for, and then have a vote? If we could have a motion to move to a public hearing on the tentative date of 8/15. Are we feel confident enough to do that at this point? Open for discussion.
This is Commissioner Caudry. I'd like to discuss the public services element a little more. I do have some additional concerns about that. So that's my perspective at this point, is to discuss both public services and utilities. Additionally, a little bit more at the next meeting.
We made a motion to pass the public services to the public hearing.
Could I just, yeah, go on.
Well, that can be reversed too, so.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. I just need clarification if we're going to reverse that.
I personally would like to hear Commissioner Caudry's thoughts, and then to consider those and then move on.
Yeah,
Think about it.
Thank you. It's whenever we can do that, whenever I can make this statement. It's not a very big issue, but just something that I suggest. Could I proceed?
Time now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Why
appreciate
don't
that.
It'd be good if we could conclude our discussion of the utility element before we roll back to the
Sure.
public services element. So can I ask again, are people feel confident enough that with the changes we proposed today, that we could move this to a public hearing on 8/15? That's not saying we're approving or making a final recommendation to the city council at this point, but that we would be able at this point to be able to set that public hearing so we could get additional input from the public as we continue to work on this at a later date. Dwight?
As long as the first condition would be to hear if any commissioner has a specific concern why we should not do that. And second is that the published document for public hearing be as we agreed to have done to this draft. That means get rid of all the yellow and blue and just show up the ones that have not yet been firmly amended and approved by the Planning Commission, so that the public has the same clean draft that we would be looking at.
Thank you, Dwight. That is exactly the conditions that we're discussing right now. Is, are people comfortable with this? Do they have any additional concerns that would prevent us from recommending that this move to public hearing on 8/15? And that we'd have a condition that we would see a clean version of this before there. Is that possible?
I'm just trying to get some logistics here with the clerk about the timing for publication for the 8/15 public hearing. It would need to be published by Friday, 8/4, and so we need to have that legal notice by 8/1, which is the date of the Planning Commission meeting in August. But we don't publish the, so if for some reason that we did that and we had the meeting on 8/1, and for some reason you said we're not ready to go to public hearing, then what would happen? Okay. So I guess there's not really a lot of risk here. So I would say that if I think the changes that you've made aren't too substantive. So I'm on the fly here. Perhaps we can have on 8/1 the changes that you've made tonight just for review. I don't think there's going to be anything else ready for the agenda for that meeting. So that would be the only thing on your agenda, would be to confirm that that draft presented to you on 8/1 with changes shown in blue, which would be just the ones that you've made tonight. Everything else then would be in yellow that you've approved. We could do that. And then if you review those documents on the 1st and you say, no, we're way off track, we could then retract that public hearing notice. I doubt whether you would, but there is that option.
So I think at this point, for the utility section in particular, we basically would be looking, did this staff accurately scribe our changes? And if we made a vote today to move ahead, we could keep to our schedule, but still have the opportunity to review and reject these if it really looked bad. We have
I just want
comments
to,
or concerns about
before
that?
we do that, I just want to check with Todd here that based on the comments made that we'd have enough time to get our, I can just work on the changes.
Well, I mean, yeah, assuming that I'm on vacation starting tomorrow for a week and a half, so I think that would be Debbie making the
Yeah,
changes.
so I can make the changes.
Yeah.
I'll get Todd's notes and
Yeah.
we can go from there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Right.
So, you know, the deal is once we have that clean with little versions, what we can also do is really, if there's not a big problem, we could go ahead with that because the public knows that we're still looking at it. And then any changes to that new blue line version, shall we say, would be minor and would be under a public hearing anyway. So we would be meeting the legal requirement of the public hearing and still be able to amend the draft so slightly that it really won't make a big difference with regard to a substantial change requiring a rehearing.
Okay, so now I'm hearing two different things. I was trying to address your concern about seeing the draft and having the chance to review it before the 8/15, which you would have to meet on 8/1. What I'm hearing now is that there's the other option is to kind of proceed with the changes that you've made, which would be shown with just the blue versions, blue changes for the public hearing. You would not then have to meet on August 1st. You would still have the opportunity to make changes after the public hearing. So you have two paths here, and I'm not really clear right now on which path I'm on.
And the reason why I suggested that second area is that I have not heard yet from Commissioner Kadri or Commissioner Banziski or anyone else what major change could be considered without further public hearing by this commission. I know there might be minor changes, but any major policy change.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I personally don't foresee myself generating a major policy change at this point.
This is Commissioner
I
Kadri.
could be wrong about myself, but I don't foresee it.
That's okay.
Under human services, for example, mental health is something that's so important, especially after the COVID pandemic. And I know we've mentioned in blips under family services, here's a mental health organization. Under senior services, here's a mental health under youth services. This might be a big change, but I do think that we should include a full-blown mental health services section under human services, because that applies to every single human being. And so I do think that that is something that I would suggest is to have a mental health services section under human services is what I was going to suggest. And again, I'm not sure if that's a
big change.
That's a big change.
Yeah, but that's okay. We could do that if it was prepared ahead of time. If you could, on your concerns, work with staff and come up with an amendment, we could pass that amendment on August 1st and meet Deb's timeline. But we'd have to have some work ahead of time.
Just to make sure we understand what you're suggesting, are you looking to add within the implementation section a objective that Kenmore would institute a human services department and services beyond what we have right now?
Well, I'm discussing we might be discussing two different things under the public services element. And
Yeah,
that's
we're going to go back to public services.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I was referring to, and I apologize for that.
No, that's fine, and we'll come back to that. But I would like to conclude our discussion on the utility section before we move back to that. So what I'm hearing right now, and Debbie's summarized, and I will try and do it again, is we can take two paths here. We can ask staff to give us a clean blue version, which we could review and pass on the 1st, in our meeting on the 1st. We would vote today to go ahead and schedule that public hearing. We come to the 1st, we'd expect to see a faithfully scribed edition of what we've discussed today, in which case we would move cleanly to the 8:15 meeting. What I'm hearing Dwight suggest is that the level of changes, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Dwight, if the level of changes are as insignificant, or we have a good sense of faith in what we've done today, we don't really need to meet on the 8th and review that clean version on the 1st, rather. And we move straight into the public hearing on the 15th. Then we would take into account any other changes we wanted to make, as long as they weren't substantial, and we would take into account the input we get from the public hearing. At that point, we would be looking to finalize the utility element after the meeting on the 15th, which we would be doing anyway. The only catch I would see here is that coming into 8:15 or after 8:1, if after seeing that clean version, which I assume we would see in that time frame, if there were substantial changes, then we might put ourselves in a situation where we either have to cancel the public hearing, or we might have to come back, discuss those changes, and then have a second public hearing. Did I say that correctly?
That's right.
So summarizing even more, if we think that we are worked on this element enough that we don't expect there to be substantial changes, and we don't have within our minds today any substantial changes we want to make, then we wouldn't need to meet on the first. We would, as Dwight has suggested or asked, we would see a clean version at the same time as the public notice went out for the meeting, and we not meet on the first, we move 8 to the 15th. The question is, I think we need to have a motion and a vote. If you vote for not meeting on August 1, it would be because we feel we've done enough work on this, and we trust the staff to scribe this.
So I move that on the utility element, that the minimum changes draft be used, and that this element not be placed on an agenda for August 1st.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, can we have a vote, please? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 We have unanimous. Forward. The clean version. August, and we'll put public hearing probably on 15. Okay, so we're done with utility element. We want to circle back now to the public service element. Commissioner Quadri, you had a proposal.
Hey, yeah, and I apologize for having to do this. So my motion today is under the public service element, under human services. We have 3 sections. One is family services, one is senior services, and one is youth services. And I do believe that we should have a separate section that says mental health services. And I know each of these sections does have a little bit of information on mental health resources for family, senior, and youth services. And I do think that we should have it in one specific section that is easy to locate, easy to find, and easy to kind of identify. And so at this point, I would move to include under human services, a section 4 that says mental health services that include, whether it's taking it from family services, including it in one section, or adding additional services out there. I do think that we should have a separate section that just for mental health services for everyone.
So I second understanding that what Commissioner Codry is asking for is that last sentence, that we establish a separate heading for mental health services.
That's correct.
We have a motion and a second. Debbie?
Well, I think there's some overlap here. The question is going to be how you pull these things out. We could just say family services and mental health, including mental health services. This is what we've kind of been able to glean right now for the services that are available. Separate effort to this, which will be conducted by the new Housing and Human Services Manager, will be a needs assessment around what are the needs. I don't know what that will kind of pull out. That might be new information, which would be separate from this. So that's just kind of a little point of fact that there is some additional work doing to kind of figure out what are the needs in Kenmore. But the services that are listed here are what we know is available. So how I jiggle these into a family or a mental health, it could be an overlap, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to find some new information, or that any research will kind of highlight new information. There might be some new information that comes out later as a result of this needs assessment and additional work done.
With that being said, I'm okay with including family and mental health services. I know under youth services, we do have some mental health resources that have been listed. So in that section, I would say youth and mental health services as well. I'd like to kind of focus on people seeing that mental health is an issue, and that's the reason why just the title itself is important. I'm not sure in the senior services whether or not mental health issues or resources are actually listed, but I would like, and that's a perfectly fine suggestion, Debbie. I'm okay with family and mental health services. I'm okay with youth and mental health services, and I'm even okay with senior and mental health services. As long as we include that and focus on that, I think that's very important.
Thank you. Todd, would you be, if we make those changes, would you then
I would be satisfied. I would be
not
satisfied.
withdraw? We'd continue to go ahead to the public.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I do have a couple more comments about, if I may.
Just before you do that, can I just make one suggestion? Debbie, could we maybe add a footnote to this section that would call out the fact that we have the work, needs assessment work that you just referenced?
Thank you. Yeah.
And then it would be an expectation that that would be incorporated in the next update for the comprehensive plan.
Maybe let me take a look and see maybe that's appropriate as an implementation measure to conduct a needs assessment.
Okay. That would be excellent. Let's do that.
Okay.
So we do have a motion on the table, and it was seconded.
I think it's been withdrawn.
Are we withdrawing it? Okay.
And I think we've all agreed that we're going to accept the changes to adding the terminology into the headings of mental health, and that we're going to look at, in the implementation section, adding a needs assessment for mental health.
Well, I think we could make it broader to sort of, social services, health services, whatever. I'll make it broad enough that it's beyond just mental health. So it's kind of a needs assessment to establish the needs, including.
And we'll see that again.
Yes, we'll make that change and show that in blue for the public hearing.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kadri, you had additional comment?
Thank you. Under public services again, if you look at the police services section, we have dispatch services up until 2021. Is it possible for us to get more updated dispatch numbers? And if so, when would that happen? I guess that's my concern, is if we can get more updated numbers. It's a question, I suppose, as more of a comment.
I don't know. I don't know what's available. That would have to be a question to the chief, as how available that information is.
Understood. And then lastly, and I'll make it short, under, I think it's, Bastyr University, and this was something that I had mentioned previously. I'm very proud of the fact that we do have a legitimate medical school, a naturopathic medical school in the city of Kenmore. Could we get information on acceptance rates in-state versus out-of-state, whether there are people that are applying from our community? Are those numbers that Bastyr University actually keeps track of? And again, I'm not sure what these are all, we're talking numbers here, and I know that's a difficult thing to keep track of, but that's something that I think that we should include. How many students is Bastyr accepting from our county or our city or our state, as opposed to how many people are they accepting from out of state? Is that maybe a question that we may ask the administration at Bastyr University? And that was my final comment about the public services element.
I don't know what data Bastyr has and would be able to pull out specifically. Again, this is sort of general. This is just sort of general data to show, not necessarily having to relate specifically to Kenmore. I don't know if they have that information or not. I don't know what the will of the commission is to pursue this further.
Would we ask the question, and if Bastyr has an answer to that, we would include it?
Yeah, that's appropriate
with the information that we do have.
So the information is whether whether Bastyr has information on enrollment for Kenmore residents.
I would say Kenmore /county residents /state residents.
I think just a broad regional.
Right.
And this is for all the campuses that they have?
I didn't even realize they had multiple campuses, but yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, they do. They have them in California, so it's
San
not
Diego.
San Diego, so it's not just the one here. So
I'm more concerned about just Kenmore, but
Just a second, I want to get to Dwight next sheet. He's had his hand up for a while. Anything else, Commissioner Podger?
that is all. Thank you.
Dwight, you've been very patient.
That's okay. So back to the mental health assessment. And I completely agree with that, but I think that we should also include a sentence after that one's going to take place that the city, the old consider mental health service improvements based upon the findings of the service, or I know it's somewhat generic, but it gives an action after the research to be considered. And I'd be open to a crafty staff sentence.
and where's this crafty staff sentence going to go? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Well, you remember that when one of the ways we resolved the mental health services issues, that we're going to indicate that there will be a study done on mental health services by the new manager, and that when that information is obtained, what are we going to do with it is the real question. So
Well,
what the saying is that,
Implementation section, we're going to
Right.
have a statement that says that we're going to conduct a needs assessment, and then
Right.
based upon the recommendations, implement those recommendations.
I didn't, is,
It's not, and it might not just be mental health, it's more of a needs assessment, a broad needs assessment for social services, which would then include mental health services. It's not specifically related to mental health services, is my understanding.
and we're going to say that they should straight out implement the recommendations. I don't know if that's exactly the way we should phrase.
No, I think what I was recommending is adding something under implementation about, let me see, let me scroll down to implementation section here. So under the implementation section, it would be adding something about conducting a needs assessment to determine the social service needs for Kenmore residents. That would be an implementation strategy.
Or evaluating or working with local partnerships. Or are there agencies that in the
Yes,
immediate vicinity that we could explore partnerships, City of Kenmore and others that provide services?
that would meet these needs. That's correct. That I'm perfectly fine with that, but I'm still with on that. Maybe social services, can we also put mental health services in that sentence? It'd make this social worker and planning commissioner very happy.
I agree with that. Thank you.
Very good. Tracy, you,
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I do have a motion for you.
please.
So I would ask the clerk that the same motion that I made on the utility element, that the same motion is now made for the, I gotta make public services element as it relates to the public hearing. Do you understand what I'm doing, right, everyone? Yes, the ayes hear the nods.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
We have a second. All in favor, signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
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 Thank you all.
Mr. Chairman,
Trepidation. White.
I move that the August 1st meeting of the Planning Commission be canceled.
Second.
All in favor, signify by raising your hand, saying aye.
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 All right, I think at this point, we've satisfied our agenda. We had with these two elements to a public hearing, which was our objective for the evening. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Mike.
Great job, Mike.
Before we adjourn, Debbie, is there anything that we've forgotten or that we need to deal with?
No.
Thank you.
I think we're good. So at 8, so no meeting 8:1, you've just cancelled that. 8:15 is the public hearing. And then in September, that's when we start talking about your recommendations that will go to the council. So we're starting to schedule dates with the city council. And so in September, we'll be sort of asking you things that you want to speak to. So you'll have to kind of refresh your memory on the transportation element and the climate action element. And then we'll be bringing those forward to council in September for your presentation.
You mean all 4 of the elements, correct?
I knew you'd say that. Hold on a minute here now. So here's kind of the tentative schedule for taking things forward to the council would be September 18th for transportation, September 25th, these are all Mondays, by the way, September 25th for the climate action element, and October 23rd for the public facilities and public utilities element.
Debbie, could you put that into an email and send it?
I will certainly do that. So again, this is trying to,
Tentative.
yep,
Red.
I can send the dates out. Yeah, send those dates out to you. But prior to those presentations to the council, there will be a planning commission meeting again, where it would be, as you know, when these are presented to council, how that typically works is that staff will give an overview of what we're doing, what the changes are, what the public participation effort was, speak to that, and then that will be turned over to the commission. And typically what you've done is if there's a particular component of those topics that you would like to present to council. So we'll have a planning commission meeting where you can identify those particular topics for presentation to council. And you've done that either, and I'm saying this out loud because I don't think Commissioner Codry has kind of had the benefit of this.
Thank you for that. I appreciate this explanation. Thank you.
So you can either do that as individuals or sometimes you've tag teamed that, but it's entirely what you wish to present to the council based on the recommendations that you've made.
So I need to make sure that the golf cart is charged up to bring it to one of those meetings. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That would certainly be one way to present your point. Yes.
Be ready for that to come out, Derek. And by the way, Mike, you know, we may be 3,000 miles apart, but we're thinking the same thoughts about that email with all these dates.
It's really scary, Dwight, really scary.
We've got time. I can send it in an email. You can discuss it again on the 15th. Yeah.
So all of us who had extensive comments on these different elements and the components of it, there is a matter of guilt here. If you don't come forward as being the person willing to discuss those in depth when we go to the city council. So keep that in mind now and in the future. All right. at the risk of everything, for the good of the order, anything else before we adjourn the meeting?
Nothing from staff.
Hearing none, I declare July 28th, 18th meeting adjourned. Thank you all again. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good trip, Dwight.
I will. It's a long one too.
Where are you, Dwight?
I'm in, where are we tonight? Princeton, West Virginia.
Wow, West
Tomorrow,
Virginia.
tomorrow we go to the National Jamboree.
Oh, congratulations. That sounds like a blast.
10 nights with 15,000 scouts, but it's going to be fun.
Oh, yes.
Looking forward to it. So I'll see you when you're back.